Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Tristan Merrick here, the digital storyteller, and I'm super excited to be with you once again for another episode of Creative to Creative, where I get to talk to some of the dopest creatives that I follow, I love, I just interact with, and I learn so much from. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking to Ishmael Watermen. He is a professional light catcher, a photographer, a digital tech, and a retoucher. He is not only just that, he's a cool dude. He's an amazing creative and somebody that I look up to in so many different ways, and I'm super excited to have him on. Let's give it up for Ish. What's up? How you doing, Ishmael?
I'm doing all right.
We gotta have some sound effects.
Your introduction skills are pretty impressive.
Hey, listen, man, listen. I don't play with this. This is real stuff. We putting on a real show here today. But listen, man, I want to jump right into it because for those that don't know who Ishmael is to me, and even you may not even know how the story of how I even got to know who you were. I knew you, or we have a mutual friend named O'Shane Howard, and O'Shane was getting mentored by yourself and myself at a certain point, and Ishmael's name kept on coming up. Your name kept on coming up. O'Shane kept on saying, "Man, my boy Ish, I really want you to meet him." And Ray Tay. And I remember, I think, the first time we actually met, I had seen some of your work, but the first time we actually met was actually at your last gallery showcase before the pandemic. I think it was probably 2019 or 2018. Yep. And I just remember thinking, wow, like this guy he's an artist. He's not just a photographer. He's not just somebody who I know through somebody else, but this guy has something to say. He has a perspective. And it's an elevated perspective, and I need to spend more time around this dude or cats like this, because he just seems like he's really, really interesting. And that's sort of where our journey began, where we kind of went on each other's radars, and we've been able to, in the last few months now, work together on a few projects. It's been really exciting, and I really want to bring you on the show to kind of introduce you to my audience and just to this sort of platform, so that you can share a little bit about your experience as a creative. We can have a cool conversation about your career, as well as just the things that you're working on. But tell the people, introduce yourself to the people in terms of, like, if somebody was to try and describe who Ishmael Watermen is, how would you want them to describe you?
That guy really doesn't care how people describe him. This is the most honest one. I'm an artist at heart. I'm extremely, I guess the word would be aloof. I think a lot of people describe me as aloof. I'm kind of always in my own world, and I try not to get too caught up in the politics of the day. I care profoundly about the craft of creation in all of its forms, and I care even more so about the skillfulness of execution. I think a lot of artists today are kind of letting go of the necessity of skill for the current necessity of volume. So it's something that I think I personally would describe myself as. I'm someone who probably cares a little too much about quality. And yeah, man, that's I guess that's kind of my artistic CV in a nutshell.
Well, what's so interesting about what you're saying is just the idea that you're aloof. I don't find you to be aloof. What I find you to be is super thoughtful, very, very mild mannered. Especially under pressure, which is something I'm not. I'm totally, like, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I never know what you're thinking, never know what you're feeling. Like, I know what you're thinking because you communicate, but I never know what you're feeling, because you're always so much of, like, the same, which is not a bad thing at all. Like, it's actually, especially on a professional shoot where there's so much on the line, there's so many things to do. Like, I still remember, I'll never forget, we were doing a shoot for a particular brand. I won't say who, but it was with O'Shane, and O'Shane was a photographer. You were the Digitech, and we had everything set up, and one of the clients, the head client, came in, and we weren't really where we need to be, right? And the client was like, "I don't like this, I don't like that. We got to change this. We got to elevate that, da da da." And I remember looking at you, because I felt the stress of the client not seeing what they wanted to see. And then I was kind of feeling a little bit of that from O'Shane. And then I looked at you and you're like, okay, that's what you need. You went and you tweaked some stuff, and then immediately it was like right where the client wanted it to be in terms of the image and the lighting. I was just like, man, that is a skill. I don't know if this man really knows that that's a skill. Could you like kind of like unpack how you think or how you're able to operate like that under pressure? Because I don't think people really appreciate that as a skill, and I think that that's a really important skill.
Truthfully, I don't really see it as pressure. I see it as someone communicating what they want, and it's my responsibility to absorb what they're saying and figure out how to translate that into light composition and the various elements that an image is composed of. Um, it's very easy, I find, for people to get intimidated, especially when they're in conversation with someone who has authority with a brand, or they have a tone in their voice, but you don't really know them. So you're kind of like, oh shit, are they upset? Or, you know?
Yep.
But for me, honestly, if someone's upset with me, you're not gonna get me to be upset with them or feel offended by them being upset. I'm gonna listen to what they're saying and I'm gonna do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my approach to everything. That's how I am with my friendships. That's how I am with my relationship, and that's how I am with work. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's very easy to let yourself be tumbled by the nuance of tone or phrasing or timing, but
Mm-hmm.
at the very core of a message is the message,
Yep.
and that's what needs to be listened to. So that's always my approach when it comes to things. I try not to take things when it comes to work. I try not to take things to heart, because at the end of the day, we all have the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
So do it.
Yeah, I find that to be super mature and super analytical. And I find that many artists are not that. You know, I'm not that. I'm very passionate. I'm very instinctual. I'm not very analytical, and I'm not very pragmatic. You know, when it comes to certain things, I know that again, another example when we shot something for another brand, and I was like getting frustrated. And I was like, it's the end of the day, and I was just like, I'm done with it, and I don't want to get this shot. And I was telling everybody to pack up, and Ishmael stopped everything. And he said, "No, do you want to get the shot?" I was like, "Well, I kind of do." Okay, well let's take 5 or 15 or 10 minutes and let's recompose. Let's do it again, and let's get it. Let's get a shot. It's extra 15 minutes. Let's just get the shot. And I just didn't see it that way. I was like, they're not getting it. I don't care. I'm just done. And I found that to be again another moment where it's like another Ishmael moment where it's like, oh wow, okay, I'm learning how not to take everything to heart and not to take where my feelings on everything. Sometimes I need to take the emotion out of it and just really assess what needs to be in that moment, right? You know?
Honestly, bro, I'm a very analytical person. Like anything that I'm committing myself to, whether I'm reading or studying a new technique or whatever, I'm super analytical. I'll try and understand every element of it. And in the same breath, I also don't overthink things just naturally. Like I'm not an overthinker. In fact, things leave my mind almost as quickly as they enter them a lot of the time. I forget names so frequently that there's more people than I can count that are probably to this day still vexed with me because I've met them 8 times. And I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Israel. And it's not that like it's not important to me or anything like that. It's just the way I think. Unless there's a specific impression being made,
Mm-hmm.
or there's a real human connection being made. Like in this industry, you're on set like 3 or 4 times a week, and you
Yep.
meet more than a dozen new people each set. I'm not gonna commit them all to memory. I can't. It's impossible for me, and I'm okay with that. And I find the people who vibe with me most, especially like in creative situations, are people who understand, yeah, this is his way of thinking and
Yep.
it works for the job. And if it doesn't vibe with your idea of how people should be in social settings or how people should be panicked when the client walks in or all those things, then like that's on you. But for me,
Yeah.
it's really simple. I try to look at things for what they are and not place filters over them
Yeah.
for room for interpretation. I don't think interpretation is necessary in conversation if people are speaking plainly.
That's good. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that again, even in everything that you're explaining, Ishmael, it really speaks to the viability of your higher ability, I should say. And what I mean by that is like many people oftentimes as artists, we don't understand how important it is to be able to work under pressure and to work within teams under pressure, and the way you respond to that directly correlates to whether or not more opportunities will come your way. Because the very fact that I saw you at another shoot that I wasn't lead on, and the way you reacted there, I was able to now say, oh man, like I definitely want him on my squad, like on my team for another project, because if nothing else, I know that there's one person that will be able to lock in, right? And I think that that's super important, even beyond just being able to deliver, is having people that understand and can see the situation in a different perspective than from what you can see. But that also leads me to my next question, which is, you had mentioned in sort of your preamble about this idea of doing things the right way or properly. And it really it resonates with me because it reminds me of my father. My father is a Jamaican, 60, almost 70 years old now. He learned photography when he was around 28 to 30 years old, even probably older than that, 35 years old. So learned photography. He went to night school at Humber North Campus, big up Humber North Campus. And the thing that he always tells me is that he always said, Tristan, you have to light the right way. You have to do the things the right way. You have to understand the fundamentals before you do anything else and whatever else. And I think that in many ways, all of the benefits and all the amazing things that digital the digital world has given us, one of the things that it didn't give us or it took away from us was our dependency on learning the fundamentals of whether it's photography, cinematography, or anything the like, because now it's like we see it instantaneously on a screen and we just
Bro, work
change some
ethic.
settings. Sorry, go ahead.
It's made the work ethic lazy. It's made the work ethic feel like, you could just slap anything together and throw a filter on it and then it's done.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I've been doing this for a long time. I was doing this when like photographers still cared about submitting to magazines like a great deal,
Yeah.
where that was like what validated you as an artist. And in those days, like you're vying for a spot in Elle or fashion or Vogue or whatever. You got to realize that your images are next to mans who have been doing this for 40 years.
Yep. Yep.
So with that thinking, it automatically places this pressure on you to learn how to do things professionally, how to do things correctly, how to care about light ratios. Most photographers don't even know what a light ratio is,
Yep.
So it's this kind of thinking that, to me, it's fundamentals that are important. Like you can't break the rules until you know them.
No, that's so can you there's so many things that you said in there, but I would love for you to break down just really quickly on a fundamental level what light ratios are, because I was aware of it for many years, but I really started to kind of get into it when I really wanted to start learning cinematic lighting and understanding that. And one of my other mentors who I need to connect with a little bit more, he's a cinematographer, a DP for film and television. And he was like, do you know what light ratios are? And I was like, I heard about them, but he's like, no, like, do you know the inside out? Do you understand, like, 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, how they affect the way you shoot, how they affect your subject? I was like, not really. He's like, well, you need to understand that if you want to be able to replicate something and create something, you have to understand it. So if you could break that down a little bit for us, sorry for those that aren't watching the video, but you should be watching the YouTube channel as well as listening to the podcast.
This is like like deep nerd speak, so I'm gonna try and
It's all good. That's why we brought you on. It's all
try and
good.
summarize it really simply. A one-to-one lighting ratio means the image is kind of flat. The light source is very clean and even across the board. If you look at the way I look right now, my window is over here, so we can say this is one. The shadows are right here, so we can say this is two. If the shadows are more dramatic, we could say it's probably three, and we're gonna measure this by f-stops, and that's really subject to like what your settings are and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But understanding like lighting ratios, especially if you're working with cinematographers and stuff like that, it's a means of quick communication. Hey, can I get a 1 to 2 on the subject over here and throw a kicker in the background to separate them? Like it's gaffer talk, but it gives you an idea of what's the mood that you're trying to create. Like right now, the lighting on me is very high key, especially compared
Mm-hmm.
to the lighting in your scene. Your
Mm-hmm.
scene's a little bit deeper. It's a little bit got more texture and stuff. My scene's mostly white, so light's just bouncing around everywhere and filling the shadows like that. So when you understand how light moves and you understand what lighting ratios mean, like even if you don't necessarily know what f-stop to throw on a 1 to 2 ratio when this guy's shooting with the light at 100%, you already know that there's a certain amount of contrast that you're going for.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're using a lighting meter or you're using your eyeballs, you can gauge what that's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the technical language and the technical approach that allows you to achieve what it is you're going for with a lot more ease. Even like times where you and I have been looking at mood boards and you're like, yeah, I really like the lighting in this. I'll be like, okay, well, I can see that the shadows are falling here and we kind of have a 1 to 1 ratio, but it's like very direct and there's clearly some negative fill on the sides based on the way the shadows are hitting because it's
Mm-hmm.
a white wall behind them, but we're not getting that white bounce back. So it's light's a language
Mm.
is the best way I could describe it. It's a language, it's math. And when you take the time to understand it, anytime you're looking at a mood board or a reference image or anything like that, you don't really have to think too hard about how to achieve this effect. You
Mm-hmm.
can look at it and say, oh, okay, we got this. All right, set that up over there. We need a big source. All right, we need a small source. We need something that is angled here and another fill from down here. And just whatever the vibe is that you're going for, it gives you the tools to understand what you're looking at.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I appreciate it, and I think that the deeper I get into this, the deeper I understand that there's so much to learn, and that I love the fact that you use the fact that light is a language, right? And oftentimes we salivate, and when I say we as creatives, we salivate over the glamour positions, the directors, right, or the positions, but we don't realize that it literally takes a team to be able to create
Mhm.
any sort of look. Like, can you kind of break that down or talk about that a little bit? Because I think we have this misconception, and I had it even up until earlier this year. I mean, I knew it took a team to do stuff, but the way I saw, you know, O'Shane and you execute, and the way that we executed on some other shoots and things of that nature, and just seeing how photographers are only one part. They're a very important part, or directors are a very important part, but they're only one part of a larger ecosystem. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of building a team and having a really strong team?
Um, two proverbs come to mind. It takes a village to raise a child, and many hands make light work. Both of these are entirely true. Sure, I'm a photographer and I know how to set up lighting and I know how to retouch and I know how to direct and I know how to cast and I know how to all these things. But why am I going to spread myself so thin when I could focus on the job I'm best at and have someone else focus on other elements of it? It makes things faster, it makes things easier. As a photographer, for example, having someone who's there to move around the lighting and you can say, hey, can you take this down a half stop? And then the image looks better. When your
Yeah.
client's there, it makes you look a lot better,
Yeah.
simply. And when you're seeing those instant results and you don't have to put down your camera, go lower a light stand, put it back up, and you're buzzing around the set looking really busy, even though you're being really busy, it lacks sauce.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. No, I
like it's just like way saucier if you have a team who knows what they're doing, can
mhm,
handle each individual job and handle it well and focus on it. If
mhm.
you have someone who's there to focus on wardrobe and you're taking pictures and they see it pop up on their screen and they see, oh, you know what, the wardrobe looks bad here, they're going to run in and fix it. Your
Mhm.
eye's not going to pick that up because you're focusing on composition, you're focusing on making sure that the light looks good, you're focusing on making sure the poses look great, you're trying to get your vision across. You're not going to focus on that one little piece of clothing that just has a little dip in it that
Yep.
your eye's not picking up on because you're not the client.
Yep.
So having a whole team of people who can look at each individual aspect of what makes an image great and focus on it and perform their role to see to it that that image is made great. It saves you time, it saves you effort, it makes you seem more professional in the eyes of the client. Because even though you might have the ability to do all these things on your own, it'll take longer,
Mhm.
it'll be harder, it'll be slower. And if you by some chance decide you're going to change the light and the client doesn't like it, well, shit, it looks bad on you versus the guy who moved the lighting and the client didn't like it. You
Yeah,
know?
I totally agree with you on that, and I also think that it speaks to the fact that you there is no this idea that there's only one person that can create something great. One person can focus in and get the model to do what they need to do and get the fabric to do what they need to do and do the backdrop and settings and the lighting and all the other stuff and retouching. That's just a lie. It doesn't exist. You know what I mean? The anything, any of the greatest images or films or anything, shows, it's such a team collaborative effort. It's not even funny. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And the reason why they can do, the person that's on camera can do their best work is because they don't have to worry about how they're looking, what they're wearing, what their hair is like, whatever else. They can just focus on delivering lines or they're delivering a performance
Mm-hmm.
or whatever else, right? So I think there's so much power in that. But let's talk a little bit about like how you got started. How did you even get started, being a light catcher, a professional light catcher and a digitech and like before all of that, before Ishmael the fine art, photographer, how did you what were you like when you were younger? How did you even get into this industry?
Um, I started out in my bedroom doing retouching for Model Mayhem,
Okay.
and then and then I decided I was going to be ambitious, and I contacted the Toronto Star, and then they had me doing retouching for a magazine they had called B Magazine.
Okay.
And then I got more ambitious and I contacted Chris Nichols, who was a photographer who was represented by Kathy Z back in the day. Fantastic photographer. Like this guy is out of this world. And I contacted him and I ended up getting to do retouching for him for Flair magazine and some bridal stuff and some stuff like that.
Mhm.
And from there, while working all these images, I was like, I could probably do this. I could pick up a camera and try a thing. So I picked up a camera. My first camera was an Olympus.
Yes.
It was pretty crappy, uh, but it got the job done. And I started experimenting, doing my thing, gaining my creative voice, figuring out what it is I wanted to shoot. For a long time, my focus was fashion, and like when you first get into fashion, like you absorb it and like you try to become a part of the culture and all these things. And as I got to see the culture of the fashion industry, I was like, ew, nah. And what more commercial? Because the commercial work, one, it pays better. Two, you don't have to deal with fashion people necessarily. Even though it's like still fashion, it's different.
Unpack that a
It's
little bit
different.
because I've had a little taste of the fashion world. not as much as you, but talk to us a little bit about that, because it, and I don't think that this is necessarily a negative thing, but I think it's the realities of understanding industries that you go into. If you want to go into this industry, what are some
Mm.
of the things that you got to just be prepared to do, or ready to deal with when it comes to that? If you don't mind sharing some of those experiences.
Yeah, so when I speak fashion industry, I'm referring more so to like independent designers, independent brands, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say any names because, but a lot of the time when a brand, like just an independent designer, contacts you to do a shoot, 9 times out of 10 they're broke, which means you as a photographer are gonna stay broke. And if you want to have a good life, if you want to be able to take care of your family, and if you want to be a photographer for a living, you can't be broke. Comparatively to like big box stores that have carry multiple brands or have locations all over the country or things like that. These are the ones that will put food on the table and provide some form of security. And I think that's something that a lot of people who work as photographers and videographers want, but they don't know how to get it because they're constantly caught up with a lot of the smaller brands. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with working with the smaller brands. You get some of your most creative content out of them, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But you need that balance. So when I was working in the environment of the fashion industry and like doing things like Fashion Week and all that stuff, uh, this is pre-COVID when you still had to network, and getting in with certain brands required a level of nepotism. And honestly, man, like I'm not necessarily antisocial, but I don't fake the funk. And I found a lot of the time when being in these environments where you had to network, where you had to friend up people, where uh, it was very the industry is very incestuous. It was very people using people,
Yeah.
and making genuine connections was a hard thing, but you'd still end up having to like talk to these people regularly.
Yep.
And I don't know, for me personally, if I don't vibe with someone on a spiritual level, like I can't connect with them, like, keep it short,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to come to the party. I don't want to be at the table while so and so is indulging their habits
Yeah.
and
Yep.
things like that. So for me, I found that the smart move was to focus more so on the larger corporate entities that were really about the final product.
Mm-hmm.
And none of the other stuff mattered. It didn't need a social gathering. It didn't need uh, all of the pageantry. It was, all right, can you deliver results? Can you deliver them on time? Can you deliver them better than who we worked with before? Okay, good. Here's your check.
That's good. No, and that's what it should be. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's this sort of idea where it's like, oh well, I feel like I want to be an artist because I want to be cool, or I want to be trendy, or I want to be able to meet celebrities and all that sort of stuff. And I'm a true believer of like, if this is your passion, all of those things will come, but be passionate about it and then treat it as a business. Like if you want to be able to make this into a living, you have to look at it as like you would any career. How are you going to be able to monetize it in a way that's going to allow you to pay your bills, save for trips, or buy property, or invest, or do whatever you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I totally hear what you're saying, and I think that you also as an artist have to identify when a certain industry is just not for you. Like you're just that's not your vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being actor and being a part of the actor, union and stuff like that, association. And I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. You know what I mean? There was like the people that were eating up at the top, and then everybody else, right? 90% of the other actors that were kind of like just out there kind of getting background roles, right? And it was like, I just didn't want to go to all the networking events. I didn't want to go to all the workshops. I wanted to create, and I want to tell stories. I want to act, and I want to perform. And in order to do so, I had to kind of remove myself from that circle and create my own table. A lot like what Tyler Perry, shares in terms of creating tables. And I think that that's really important. But that being said, what so you went into commercial stuff. When did you end up going into getting your own studio? When did that sort of happen, and why did you kind of go that direction? A cool fact, by the way, my dad also had his own studio for a time as well in Brampton, when Brampton was still cheap to have a studio. Not anymore, but yeah. Like, what was your thoughts about starting a studio?
Well, for a time, I was frequently renting studios. The studio that I actually ended up acquiring belonged to someone that I was continually renting the studio from, oddly. He was moving, and I was like, okay, let me just hop on this opportunity. Um, for me, it was kind of an ends to a means. I found myself renting studios frequently, and at that stage in my career, I was more so a studio photographer than anything else. And I wanted a place where I could practice and play and get better at everything I do and understand light more and uh, create an atmosphere where I could constantly have other creatives in the space. So I'd rent out the studio and I would almost like for free most of the time help people set up the lights and help them figure out what they wanted to do. Because at the time, to me, it wasn't working as a digital tech. I was testing my skills. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, all right, let me see if this works. And every time it worked, the client was impressed. And then it became like a regular client. And it was a decent model.
Yeah.
So I had the studio for like 4 years. And after a while, I kind of got bored with it. I wanted to explore and shoot in different places in the world. So I got rid of the studio and started traveling. I did some work in Europe. I did some work in the Caribbean. And then the last few years, I've more so just been focusing on commercial work here in the city. But the studio it was an opportunity to become stronger in my skills. I always feel like anything that you want to commit yourself to, you need to be the best at it.
Mm.
And even though, and I don't mean that necessarily as like comparing to other people, I mean, if there was to be a test where they're grading you, A's, B's, and stuff like that, like
Mm-hmm.
you need to be an A student. You have to know all the elements of it to make sure that you're on top of it and you can get the good jobs because of your good grades.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think that at the end of the day, when we're talking about, um, you know, really committing ourselves to this art form, we have to be at a place where we have to be willing to put up or shut up. You know what I mean? Put our money where our mouth is. I say, I have this
Mm-hmm.
saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have this saying that I say to O'Shane and a lot of my friends. I say, you can always make more money. You can't make more time. And so if you have an opportunity, take advantage of that opportunity, even if you stretch yourself a little bit. I mean, obviously use wisdom and use, what I mean, but be intentional. If you're about this thing, then be about it. Invest in it. You can always make that
Mm-hmm.
money back. You know what I mean? But can you make that time back that opportunity is going to, that opportunity is going to give you? You may not be able to. So my whole thing is, let's be intentional about being committed to this thing. The other thing that I really loved was the fact that the importance of having a space where you can create, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
something that I would love to hear your thoughts on, the whole idea of creatives having the ability or having the foresight to own rather than just always rent. Because I think that, especially within this sort of shut down open up, the last 2 years has been kind of up and down in terms of being able to have access to other spaces. What would you say to those creatives that are like, well, I don't have any space, I don't have any place to create, like, what do I do? Right. I have some thoughts on it, but I would love to hear your thoughts first.
It's harder now than it was back when I had a studio. Back when I had a studio, you could get a loft for like $1,200. That's
Let's give it up for
not at
that.
all the reality at all anymore.
Mm,
So one, I would say if you can afford the loft prices in the city right now or wherever you are, then do it. Because at the end of the day, you're giving yourself a space that you can work, a space that you can live, and a space that you can create freely. Um, if you don't have that luxury, then I would say explore your creativity in other ways, in other spaces. Something that I've been doing quite a bit for the last year or so is doing a lot of composite work where I will shoot someone just like on a background and I'll put them wherever I need them to be.
mm.
I brought a white piece of foam core to the bridge at the Eaton Center, shot a model on it, and then put her in Morocco. And it looks like she's in Morocco. And people are like, oh, wow, when did you go to Morocco? And I'm like, haha.
I love that. I love that. I think also, just to add to what you were saying, I I also feel like, many artists, they do have a space. It's called their home, right? And I know that
Hmm.
it's not sexy and it's not cute and it's not beautiful all the time, but if you can wrap your mind around maybe the idea of, if you are renting an apartment and maybe you have an extra room, a guest room, or you have something else, and really being able to repurpose a space or an area or a room or a closet in your home to be able to create, it makes a world of a difference, because then you're not having to be totally dependent only on an external space in order to create, or only to go outside. You have a closet, you have a bedroom, a guest room, or a part of a room to be able
Hmm.
to say, you know what, this is where I can create. I've anointed and allocated this space for that. And on top of that, it also builds that level of understanding that you're being an artist is a holistic thing. It doesn't, you know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
not just I just have a camera and that's the only component that I need. It's like there's other elements. You look like you have something to say. Let me give you the floor
I
to
was
you.
about to say, like, if you have a large screen TV and a portrait lens, you can shoot anywhere, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. No,
Like
absolutely.
like honestly, creativity is really up to what you want to make it and what you want to do with it. Um, for me personally, I love a big production. I love when I have an opportunity to work with a brand and we get to bring out like a 6 foot scrim and multiple lights and have like an awesome location and stuff like that. But those shoots only happen every so often, you know?
Hmm.
So in the cases where that's not possible, like get tools that allow you to make the space that you have available into something more interesting. Like I just got an optical snoot, so I'm able to project all kinds of light patterns and stuff like that now. And
Oh wow. Can you
that
yeah, what does that entail? Like an optical snoot? I've never heard. I have like a normal snoot, but yeah, like what can you do with that?
uh you know what a gobo is?
Yep, yep. I know where to go, boys. Yep.
Okay, so like a gobo will have it'll be like a little piece of metal like this big and like it'll have like something cut out in it like light shining through it like the shape of a loft window
Yeah.
or the negative space of leaves and
Yep.
things like that. So when you shine the light, it looks like a window is shining on the wall, or it looks like
That's dope.
the sun's passing through some leaves or something like that. And it's just one of these simple tools that gives you so much creative freedom because if you are stuck inside, which most of us are right now, and your home doesn't have like this kind of aesthetic going on, but if you could just like just make the lighting look like this,
Yeah.
like you were in a loft or you were sitting under a tree or whatever, then that creative freedom is a little bit more accessible. And
Hmm.
sure, you could go to a loft or you could go sit under a tree, but sometimes it's nice just to be able to do it at home.
Yeah. No, no, I agree with you. I think I seen somebody, forgot who it was, who who was doing it. I think it was something Sanchez or Gomez. There's a guy on of photography, Matty something. He's a Spanish guy from New York, and he has an adapter that he put on a Boeing's mount light.
Ortiz.
And Ortiz, yeah, Matty Ortiz. There you
Yeah.
go. And it's very similar to what you're describing, and he said it
Mhm.
totally changed his whole photography. Like he's been going crazy on it, like overdoing it, but it actually looks super creative.
Yeah, it gives you just a little bit more creative freedom.
Mhm.
And I think when you have tools that allow you like just a little bit more room to play, it's always more enjoyable. That's actually the reason why I chose the Fuji system. Like I'm coming from the Canon system and I've been using Canon for I don't know, like maybe 13 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And to jump systems was a big decision for me.
Mhm.
But after I had rented and played with the Fuji system, honestly, man, it just makes photography fun. Like
Mhm.
all the dials are mechanical and it has all these film settings and you can do a lot of color grading in camera just to like play with your creativity and then the raw files are great. So it was a very obvious thing for me because I like to play in camera. Like even when I was on Canon, I would always go into the settings and change the contrast, change the
Mhm.
tint and all these the what Canon allowed, and it lended to the aesthetic of what I was creating. So it's just more freedom in that range. Like mirrorless has opened up a large field for photographers to play a lot more.
I find that too, just to your point, Ishmael, that many photographers, specifically younger photographers, are photographers that are getting into this. They don't really actually understand what picture profiles are for, or what color creative styles are for. I forgot what they called it, like creative. I think it's like creative profiles, but there's picture profiles and there's like creative filters or whatever, and they don't use any of that stuff. And I remember, when I got my first camera, my 60D, um, I went through every single setting. I want to know everything about that camera. I didn't want to just shoot raw to shoot raw. I want to be able to be like, okay, if I need to shoot raw, I can shoot raw. If I need to shoot JPEG, I can shoot this. If I need to shoot video, 4K,
Hmm.
HD, whatever else, slow mo. I knew all the settings and why they were there and where I wanted them to be. What, like, can you? I don't know. Like, why do you think people are just less interested in that? Like, we spend so much money and so much, make such hoopla around camera bodies, but then we don't actually learn the camera bodies.
I mean, for me, I like to be able to change my base image. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a retoucher, so obviously I'm gonna color grade and do all kind of things to the image. But if I can change the base so that it's closer to what I'm imagining, then when I'm seeing it in camera, I'm getting more inspired because I'm seeing what I'm going for. You know, I don't
Mm.
need to wait till I get to the computer to change the temperature to have this red quality to it. I can do it in camera. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to apply a film look to it
Mm.
because the camera has one. So I can get something closer to what it is that like I'm imagining the final image to be. It and because you're shooting raw, of course you also have the freedom to like undo it and like apply
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want. But I think it's important, especially like when you're working with clients. A lot of times clients don't have imagination. So if you can show them something that's closer to the final edit, like right off the bat, then why wouldn't you?
That's so important, and I think we really need to home in on this. Is the idea? There's two fundamental ideas, right, that are kind of at war with each other, where it's like, do I shoot in camera, or do I just do things in post? And I think many people that are coming from sort of the old school, or from sort of like film. Pardon?
Both.
Oh, you should. Oh, you said both. See, for me, I find that people that are like, let's say, quote unquote old school, they usually lean towards doing in camera, or at least getting it right in camera to a certain extent, and not being totally dependent on post. Now, they're not saying that post isn't important and it doesn't have its place, but I find that oftentimes new school or newer photographers are so dependent on post production, that they don't necessarily, like you said before, they're not necessarily always as particular and as intentional about getting it right in camera on the day. You know what I mean?
So one of the main things I always think is important is making sure your histogram is balanced.
Mm.
Not
You told
not
me
just
that
in
several
terms of,
times.
yeah, it's not just like in terms of like the black point and the white point, but also the color areas, because you could have an image that has a lot of red in it and the red is peaking. And anytime a color begins to peak in on any sensor, you'll start to see artifacts that you don't want. So if you have the ability to dial down the saturation a little bit in camera, you're giving yourself a better raw file. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
that's just the facts. And when it comes to your raw file, this is like the foundation of your image. You want it to be as close to perfect as possible. um, I know a lot of photographers who like to underexpose or overexpose their raw files and then bring it back because they like what it does to the noise, or they like what it does to the textures or whatever. And honestly, like, that's them. I can't say they're right or wrong. um for me personally, I always look at it like, is what's white supposed to be white? Is what's black supposed to be black?
Yep.
And are the skin tones where the skin tones need to be? Because if the skin tones are getting blown out in this area, or the shadows are really dark, how do you know your client's not going to want a little bit more detail in that after?
Hmm.
Like, wouldn't you rather shoot it just a little bit more down the middle and then push it to the extremes that your imagination wants, and then have the option to pull it back afterwards? Like, you
Yep.
don't want to create a raw file that leaves you stuck with an aesthetic. You want to have something that's malleable.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think that having, but this also goes back to having a great team, right? When you have a great team, then there's people that will collaborate with you and help you understand that we can still get to the vision of where you need to get to, but we also want to be able to, it's like when you're cooking, right? You know, there's a difference between eating broccoli in raw, uncooked, just washed, versus broccoli in a veggie chip, right? The broccoli in a veggie chip is still, there's broccoli particles in it, but it's been through so much of the process. There's less actual broccoli left of the actual
You
real
know
thing
what?
than, you know what I mean?
I like this metaphor because this is a great example. So when you eat something like a broccoli chip, right?
Yep.
Sure, it has some of the nutrition that's in broccoli, but your body has to add water to it from your body, so it's dehydrating you
Yep.
so that it can properly process this broccoli chip. Compared to when you're eating broccoli that's just plain broccoli, it your body knows what to do with it because it
Yep.
doesn't have to add anything to it for it to be digested and absorbed.
Yep.
So imaging is very much the same way. It goes back to what you're saying, that photography, videography, this whole entire craft, it's very holistic. You have to look at things from the standpoint of, what is the raw ingredients,
Hmm.
and how do I get the raw ingredient to grow and be a good harvest
Hmm.
before I harvest it, prepare it, cook it, and do whatever else I want to do to it.
Listen, no, I totally hear you, and I think that, again, because, and I can relate to that on a lot of different levels because of the fact that I'm a cinematographer, and I like, that's sort of my first love in doing films and shooting and filming. I'm always constantly thinking, okay, how can I get to the best point possible in terms of getting the best image, best audio, all that sort of stuff. And then I can add my seasoning. I can cut it up. I can chop it up. I can do all the
Mm-hmm.
other things to create whatever I want to create in my head. But oftentimes it's like, you know, people don't think that way, or it's harder for them to think that way because we're not necessarily accustomed to thinking about giving ourselves flexibility and giving ourselves the space to be able to create whatever we want to create. But that being said, tell us something personal about you that we don't know. I mean, I know some things about you, but what are some things that people may not know about Ishmael, outside of being a great photographer and light chaser and catcher and Decepticon when it comes to photography.
Bro, I'm
Maybe
an
not
Autobot. What are
Decepticon.
you talking about?
Autobots roll out. Yeah, that's my best.
Something people don't know about me. Honestly, yo, I don't like the public being in my business.
Big up yourself. Oh Lord.
I'm a very, very private person, and anytime my personal life ends up being public information,
Mhm.
it I just don't like it. Like even if it's
Mhm.
like a positive thing, like I don't need people to know when my wedding date is. I don't
Mm.
need people to know uh how many siblings or how many nephews or how many I'm very private in that regard. I think
Mhm.
social media has this has created this need in people to share everything that's going on in their life. Like right now there's the whole trend on social media, like got vaccinated, and I'm looking at like, y'all motherfuckers don't know when my next dental appointment is. Why you need to know when I've been injected? Like that's personal. I believe that a private life is a happy life. So things that people don't know about me, people know what they need to know.
I like that. I like that. I like that. Well, let me ask you this then. What are okay, what has, getting engaged to obviously the love of your life, how has that impacted your art or you as an artist? Because I think oftentimes our art is a reflection of what we're going through or what we see or what we experience. How has that affected your artistry? Or has it not done anything at all?
I think it has. Okay, how do I word this? I would say there have been two influences on me that have pointed me to one main influence. Um, my dear friend O'Shane, who is uh, very outspoken about his faith,
Mhm.
and my beloved Jasmine, who is a woman of a phenomenal spirit. Both have led me to pay a lot more attention to what scriptures say
Mhm.
and what is righteous and what is good in the eyes of the Most High. So, with that being said, I would say it's influenced my art in a way where anytime I'm coming up with a concept or uh, being presented a job or anything in that lane, my first consideration is, would this be right in the eyes of the Most High? Should I be doing something that has this person wearing horns, or should I maybe pass on that? Should I be doing this thing that aligns with like these people's movements, or should I maybe stay away from that because I don't want my work to I don't want my work to reflect the idolatry that many of the masses are into. I don't want my work, my art to align with a lot of the worldly ideals that a lot of the art that's currently on the internet aligns with. So I'm taking my time, I'm being mindful, and I'm making sure I pour every bit of love I have into everything I create because I think that's important. I think that right now we live in a time where artists are about mass appeal and getting things out quickly, and it subtracts in the quality. And I don't just mean like the technical quality of the image, but the quality of the message, the quality of how the work makes people feel and what it's telling them. So I would definitely say that chain of the Most High, of my family, and everything that I've been blessed with during this pandemic has definitely had a huge influence on the way I create. And even more so, it's had an influence on the way I share. I know from practice that when I share work, I get more work. So I don't post any work unless I know that I'm getting into a dry season. So I need to stir things up.
Yeah.
And though that might not appease the algorithm, I know it works for me, you know?
Hmm. And I think that that's really really important. And I want to touch on that, but I also want to touch on, you said a lot of things about just really having a level of moral and ethical awareness of what you want to do and what you want to put out into the ether. I was listening to an interview with Bill Bellamy just yesterday, and he said like the reason why he doesn't take every single role is because those roles are forever. Those images are forever. You can't escape the work that you've put in, especially if you're putting it in front of a mass
Mm-hmm.
audience or you're doing it for commercial consumption, and especially being, creatives that are black. Um, I think we have to
Mm-hmm.
be super intentional about the images and the things that we're creating, because then it reflects on our community and on our people, right? And that leads me
Absolutely.
to, that leads me to the Rapture, right? That project, because that really, I grew up in a very conservative, Jamaican home, Christian home, and we didn't have paintings of like naked people all over the place, right? We just didn't. That just wasn't a thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? In most Jamaican homes, you don't see that. But I was always like, I until still to this day, I'm a passionate lover of the Renaissance period of history and of the 16th chapel or
Mm-hmm.
16th chapel, however you say it. Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, all of those painters, and there was tons of other artists that were around that time. And when I saw your work and I saw your showcase, it gave me that vibe. Like I was like, I could just stare at. There's certain pictures I could just stare at all night, and I mean, on face value, they're naked people in the air, but it wasn't just about the nudity. It was about the movement. It was about the warmth. It was about the clouds. It was about the ascension. It was about the story, the visual storytelling that you created and sculpted within this project. And, I have two questions in this. Number one, where did that come from? I mean, where did that sort of inspiration come from? What's happening next with it? And then I guess this is the third question, and more importantly, are we going to see another Rapture type of project? Are you working on something else that's kind of that level? So there's a lot of things in there, but I just wanted to kind of throw those out to you.
Let me preface this by saying where I am at now in life, in spirit, in walk, I don't think I would do a project like Rapture again where it's naked people ascending into heaven. Um, in in retrospect, it's a somewhat blasphemous approach. And in that being said, the inspiration was indeed Rome and the 16th chapel. So it would make sense that their approach is blasphemous because the reference is blasphemous. But I it was definitely an influence. But a lot of it for me was wanting to do something that could hopefully reverse generations of brainwashing. Um,
Mhm.
so many black homes grow up with, an image of a white man on a stick or a white woman and a white baby, and they are told this is God, and this is what they've been told. They don't think to look beyond that. And honestly, if you read the scriptures, you'd realize like, oh, that doesn't make any sense,
Mhm.
and to depict that shouldn't be done. So it's uh it's one of these things where I look back on it and I would say that it was an ambitious project. I was young, I was ignorant in faith, and I have a ability to analyze artwork that I find beautiful and pick apart the elements of it that make it beautiful so that I can apply it to my own works.
Mhm.
Um, what's happening with Rapture next? Honestly, I have a couple of the pieces still on hand, and once they're all sold, I think I'm just gonna leave it alone and focus on the next project. I've been playing with a lot of ideas, and I've been waiting for spirit to guide me on which ones are righteous versus which ones are just self-serving. So
Mhm.
in that regard, I don't know when the next one will drop, and I'm not sure which one of these concepts is going to be because I have like folders and folders of environments I've created and mood boards and all these scenes that are ready for me to like put finishing touches on, but I'm waiting for spirit to guide me and tell me what's next, what makes sense, which one is the right one, and which one serves a true purpose versus which one is just clout and hype. Um, Sorry, what was the
No,
other
no,
question? There was one more
no.
question.
That was those are basically you answered all the questions. To be honest with you, I feel I feel very adequate that adequately that you answered the questions. Let's talk about ways that we can support you. We can help you. We can get the word out about Ishmael Waterman. What are some ways that myself and the audience can support you and just help you as an artist?
Shit, hire me.
You heard the man. He said, "Hire me." Wow. Yeah, Ishmael,
That's
you are the
it.
best. Honestly, I no, it's that's real though, but that's real. Like, hire the man. I mean, what you have like, what 20 years of experience, at least.
Nah, not yet. I'm at year 15 now.
I mean, listen, between that and high school days, you probably have the 20 years right there, anyways. But no, honestly, the thing that I really, really love about again your story is the fact that you actually started very similar to the way I started because I didn't start behind the camera. I started in front of the camera, and then what I did was I actually wanted to. I people wanted me to edit their stuff for them, so I started to do editing. And then after a while, I was tired of editing people's stuff, and I felt like I could shoot better than them, so I ended up shooting. So there's a lot of parts of your story that are really really interesting to me. I guess the last thing that I would love to hear from you about is just the idea, Ishmael, of what you would want to share with the next generation, the next cohort of creatives. The next O'Shane Howards, the next Ishmael Watermans, the next whatever up and comers that are young and hungry that want to be great. What are some of the key pieces of information you would give to them virtually if you could never see them again? What are some of the key pieces of advice you would give them right now?
Create meaningfully. Um, like you're always gonna get jobs, and jobs are going to be what the client wants, what the client needs, and all of that. And then you're going to have your own personal artwork, your personal projects. My advice would be create meaningfully, create what is true to your heart, what is meaningful to your heart. That way, 5 years down the road, you can look at that image and be like, yeah, did that. Um, don't overthink things. I think this is something that a lot of my peers in the industry suffer from, and even myself, I suffer from it at times. Um, when we overthink things, we don't allow ourselves to actually just create because, you know, we're too in our heads and we need everything to be perfect. We need to make sure we get this perfect location or this perfect model, get this camera because it has this pixel count versus this camera. And there's so many variables that we're able to place in our own ways. So I would say create meaningfully, create directly from the heart
Mm-hmm.
because it's it's what sustains you as an artist. Um, it's very easy to get caught up in just being a commercial pawn or a commercial tool where you're just doing whatever the check tells you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's you, that's you. Some people are about their bag above all else, and like I can't knock that. But
Mm-hmm.
if you are looking to be an artist, if you are looking to be an artist so that your voice can be heard because you feel you have something to say, don't let anyone else say it for you. Create meaningfully.
That's dope. No, that's dope, man. So much to learn, so much to digest. I love, honestly, I love talking to you because I think there's always something I can walk away with and chew on. And you know, I just want to say publicly, I appreciate you. I love you. I really do. I love the spirit by which you walk in and the level of excellence that you execute on. And honestly, if I can tap into that, even 10% of that, I'll be happy with the rest of my career. But how can we follow you? How can we, what are some of the ways that we can follow you and check out some of your work?
Yeah, my website is ishmaelwaterman.com. My Instagram is ishmaelwaterman. I'm not a big social media man. Like, I might post to my stories every once in a while, and when I do, it's probably not my work. It's just something that's on my mind. And yeah, I'm accessible via email, and I'm always down for a good conversation. I'm always down for a good dialogue where I can share and pick the minds of other creatives like yourself and Hola Vibes.
Dope. This was our Hola Vibes, yes. I need to get some Trini plugs in there too, sound effects. I don't have any Trini sound effects. Take something and wave it, you know. Listen, Ish, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for just bringing such a great conversation to all the viewers and all the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you for listening to another episode of the Creative to Creative podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching on YouTube. Subscribe, like, and share to the podcast and to the YouTube channel. And until the next time, stay blessed, stay focused, and stay safe. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Creative to Creative podcast with Tristan Barracks. Make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. If you would like to be a guest, please email us at info@tristanbarracks.com. Peace.